What is the intention of this tax? We're joined by Lena Olum. She's Assistant Manager, Corporate Policy Unit at the Kenya Revenue Authority, that's KRA, to put this into perspective. Lena, good afternoon. Thanks for making time for us here on Business Now. I'd like to begin with talking about the process of public participation that KRA had set in place, seeking views from members of the public. That concluded, we know, in August. That would be last month. Could you talk to us about just a summary of some of the views that you received regarding this tax?
Thank you so much, Yvonne, and good afternoon to you all. So yes, as you have said, that the government is introducing the digital service tax, which is going to be a tax on the income of persons who are earning, who are providing services through digital marketplace. And after that law was passed, then we embarked on developing regulations, also a requirement of the law, to guide now stakeholders and taxpayers on how that law is going to be implemented. And of course, in line with the Constitution and the statutory provisions, Statutory Instruments Act, we conducted stakeholder participation, asking stakeholders to give us their comments on the regulations as we had. And we did receive very good feedback from stakeholders. Most of them, of course, understand why we are introducing this tax, because what we are trying to do is to level the playing field. Now that most businesses have moved online, and since our taxation regime mostly targets brick and mortar kind of businesses, we needed to find a way of making sure that everyone pays their rightful share of tax. So the feedback we got was just mostly with regard to ensuring that the implementation is smooth, and also just to deal with simplification of the ways in which they are going to comply. So most of the feedback we did get was positive, and we have reviewed those and incorporated them into the regulations as appropriate. Thank you,
Lena, what would you say to those who decry this move, obviously not opposed to it, but who are saying, I mean, look, people are moving away from the brick and mortar type of business because that is expensive, you know, there's all of these taxes you have to comply with, there's rent, and they're moving to an easier space because, you know, government agencies have not put in place enabling mechanisms to enable their businesses grow, and that this is, you know, still very nascent in many ways. And rather than the government enable this environment, the first thing that the government does is attempt to tax this type of business.
Yes, of course, there are those misgivings with regard to the tax, but Yvonne, as you are aware, that this is a global phenomenon. It's not just Kenya that is grappling with this sector. And while it is nascent, it is a very active sector and is doing very well. And if we have a situation where we only tax a certain part of the economy, then we have a section of the economy, or rather a section of the citizenry, that are overburdened with the taxes. So to level the playing field, as I said earlier, there is need for the government then to expand the tax base. And since businesses are moving to the digital economy, then that is where, again, we should expand our tax base. And as you mentioned, the rate is 1.5%, and we have started at a very minimal rate, of course, taking into cognizance the fact that some of these businesses are just starting out. And in the case for those businesses which are in Kenya, where you're a resident, or even if you're a non-resident, then you have a presence in Kenya, this is just an advance tax, which means you can offset it against your final tax liability. So in that way, then you get some sort of relief and you're not overburdened.
Okay, and what of those that say this will just basically target the smaller sort of businesses that are doing, you know, selling things on Facebook, on WhatsApp, and on Instagram, and that you might be unable to go for the bigger players? For example, there's Airbnb, you have Uber, you have Netflix that is now available in the country. How would you be able to go after the bigger players? Because those are companies that are not even incorporated in the country. And that for failure to get, you know, those big guys, that you then come after, you know, the small businessman with their, you know, small sort of volume of sales.
Okay. So in response to that, no, it does not target the small businessmen. Actually, the digital service tax that we are adopting, we have countries in the international arena that are also adopting similar kinds of digital service tax. And yes, the main target is usually the big corporations. And most of these corporations, they may not be available here, but they operate in the country. So in this case, what we are requiring them to do is to register with KRA, what we call a simplified tax registration framework, and then they will be able to account for their taxes. So it does not only target small businessmen, it targets even the Facebooks and the Googles and the Airbnb. So even if you have a look at our regulations, the scope of the taxable services that are listed in there include those who are providing digital marketplace, website, or other online applications. And this includes the e-commerce platforms and the sharing economy, such as Airbnb and the taxi hailing services. So everyone, we are trying to bring everyone within this tax, not just the small businessmen.
All right, Lena, is there, you know, we're hearing word, and it could be rumor, but we have you now, so it'll be a good time to just understand this. There's rumor that there's pressure, particularly from the big countries like the USA, to abolish this tax in line with the trade ties that Kenya is set to get into with the United States. And many of these companies are actually incorporated in the USA. So what would you say to that? Is there any truth to that, that there is international pressure to drop this tax for those big players?
There's not, perhaps pressure is not the right word, but there is, of course, concern. And this is not something that only Kenya is experiencing, but also countries like France and the UK, since they have also introduced digital service tax. But we are in or rather conversation with them, and they understand why we are going this way. And of course, what we are doing is just monitoring how this is going to play out. So as of now, we are on track to introduce this by 1st January 2021. And of course, we will consider the views of our trade partners and basically just work from there. But right now, what we have just had with them is engagements on how this is going to impact them. And we've just reassured them that this is not just targeting the US companies, but any company, both Kenya and even outside Kenya, that are earning income from Kenya through digital marketplace.
Indeed. Lena Olum, thank you very much for that. From the Kenya Revenue Authority, Assistant Manager, Corporate